Okay, so I was just on the phone with a first-time conference planner. Her name's Nikki, and we were talking about different things, obviously about keynote speaking. She was evaluating me as a keynote speaker, and she was asking me a bunch of questions, and they were great questions. But the last question, I just thought it was really good, so I thought I'd make this quick video just to see if it's of any value to any of you. And so the last question that she asked me was, what are some of the mistakes that you see early conference planners make? And I thought that was really wise that she was asking that question, you know, like she fired away with all of her speaker questions and we talked through a bunch of stuff like her vision for the thing, but what are some of the mistakes? And so I thought about it and I came up with 3 or 4 of them, but here's why I'm making this video, is because we were talking specifically about the opening session. And as you know, the opening session it's your first opportunity, it's your first impression where a lot of your conference goers are going to decide how they feel about the conference experience. Do they feel like they got their money's worth? How does it feel? Are they excited? And that kind of sets the tone for the rest of the conference. As you know, you've probably been to a bunch of conferences yourself. So that's why this really matters. And so thinking through it, I came up with 3 things, maybe a bonus if you watch all the way to the end, about the common mistakes that I think people make when they're putting on a conference. All right, so here's the first one, and if you've made this mistake or any of these mistakes, I just want to say up front, like, this isn't me taking digs or anything. I really just hope this helps and it gives you something to think about. But the first mistake that people make is not hiring or not empowering the right MC or host for the event. So the MC or host for the event, a lot of times what conferences do is they'll just take like the highest level leader, whether that's like the president of the organization, like the president of the counseling association or the principals association or the leadership association or whatever. Automatically we just assume that that's the right person to be the face of this event, which that's a great idea, but that's not always right, and here's why. Because you want to pick somebody with those specific strengths to kick off your conference. You want them to be darn near as good as your keynote speaker, your host or your MC or the person that's going to be opening up your conference. They should be engaging, they should be kind of like a real hamish kind of extrovert, somebody that is energized by being on a stage, somebody that moves around, somebody that's engaging, that excites people, that makes people laugh maybe, that understands the craft of public speaking. So again, this is often an overlooked small part, but it makes a big impact if you get it right. That would be finding the right host or MC. I'm telling you, it'll make a world of a difference when it comes to getting people excited about the conference, especially in your opening session. All right, now the second one kind of piggybacks on the first one when we're talking about the MC and the host, the person that's driving this whole opening session, where it's their job to get everyone pumped up, but even more importantly, how to keep them pumped up. So if you've been to a conference, maybe you experienced this in your own conference that you've put on. Again, this is not a knock or a dig or anything like that, but sometimes towards the end of the opening session, by the time the keynote speaker goes to come on, people are kind of just like, you know, their body language, they're starting to slouch and slunch and the energy's just not in the room anymore. And one of the big reasons why is because crafting the flow or the energy of this opening session is equally as important as just not missing one of the elements. So a lot of times you'll see a pledge and invocation, you'll see opening remarks, you'll see all of the thank yous to the leadership teams, and all of those things are important. But sometimes there's even more than that, and we're trying to fit in all these different elements, and it can feel like it's just one thing after another thing after another thing. And that takes energy from your conference goers. Keep in mind that these are people that probably have traveled from some significant distance and they've done a lot that day and they've met new people and some of them have already went to either workshops or competitions or whatever it is. And their energy levels are not at a 10. So the last thing you want to do is just really make it a long-winded kind of thing leading into the keynote. For 2 reasons. One, because they're not going to get everything that they normally would have out of that keynote experience. But that makes the keynote speaker's job just that much harder to lift that room and to get everybody excited. So like when I was talking to this conference planner on the Zoom call that I just had, one of the reoccurring themes in that call and many calls is conference planners are looking for keynote speakers to really rile everybody up and rally the troops and to really introduce this conference's theme, get people excited, getting people talking about it and posting on social media. Well, it makes their job that much easier to do those things if you have a really good flow to your opening session. So here are a couple things that you could do. Make sure that you break up some of the boring informational stuff with some fun stuff, whether that be a fun, uplifting video, whether that's games. So you're gonna have to do all those things like pledge and invocation, welcoming remarks, and all of those things, but in between, why don't you just plan in some elements of fun or some elements of interaction or movement or music or video? I think that would really go a long way in making sure that everybody is excited going into that keynote. So instead of the keynote going from here to here, you're gonna start here and your keynote is just gonna get everybody way pumped up for the event. All right, so here's tip number 3. This is something that the best conferences do and do well, and I love working with these people. What they do is they keep really good notes about 4 different things. So this is in what's called a post-production meeting. You might have your own name for it or your own way of doing it. Maybe you send out like a Google form that's asking for like positives or negatives or positives and deltas. But here are 4 categories after the conference is over, right? You want to make sure that you distill and do the things right again year after year and build upon those things you're doing right. But you also want to identify the things that are wrong. And even deeper than that, there are 4 things that I would recommend you look for. And that would be right, wrong, missing, and confused. Again, that's right, wrong, missing, and confused. So right, that's one of the most important things. Talk with your team about some of the moments that hit the hardest, that you don't want to forget to do again next year. Wrong, that would be things that just completely fell flat and you're like, no, that was horrible. Whether it was somebody that you had on stage that just really sucked the life out of the room, or maybe you didn't have the right people in the right places, or maybe your check-in process was terrible and people were still trickling in as the opening session was beginning, or whatever it was. That's wrong. Missing, things that while you're sitting there in the room during opening session, and this is going to happen, is as you're looking around the auditorium or wherever you are, you're thinking, hey, you know what we should do next year? So if you're anything like me, sometimes you have those great ideas, but the problem is I oftentimes, if I don't write it down, I forget those ideas and then they never happen. And then the last one is confused. One of the things that you kind of just need to tweak, that maybe they could be better, maybe you just need to cut it out altogether, or things that just didn't feel like they made sense in that moment for your conference. So again, that's right, wrong, missing, and confused. And finally, if you got this far, it's making sure that you know what you want your audience to know by the end of the opening session, and what do you want them to do at the end of the opening session. This is absolutely critical. And here's why that's critical. Because if you get really clear on what you want your audience to know by the end of opening session, and also the action steps that you want them to do, whether that be go to more sessions the next day, whether that be post more on social media about your experience, or inviting more people to the thing, whatever you want them to know, information, and what you want them to do, the actions you want them to take place, that is really going to help you to tailor fit your approach to everything you do that night, everything you say that night, the music you play, the way the graphics look, what the speakers say when they say it. It's a small detail, but again, it makes a huge impact. All right, guys, well, I really hope that this helped out. I hope it helps you as much as it helped Nikki, and it even helps me to think through these things as I'm talking with conference planners like you. All right, guys, till next time.